And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli. That's Bud Elliott. That's Danny Cannell. I'm Chip Patterson. Time to keep it going here on SEC Week. We did the SEC East earlier in the week, so go and download that anywhere you get your podcast, Apple's podcast. Follow and stream us on Spotify. You can catch us on youtube.com/cover3 for that multi-platform excellence. And time is ticking down. We have got to tell you, the Cover 3 listener, that you need to come and compete against us in the CBS Sports bracket games, because that's right. We're in there. Bud's going to be in there. Danny's in there. He's changed his national champion 3 times already, but it's okay. You've got time until things lock. Tom's already in there, and we want to compete against you. Join at cbssports.com/cover3 brackets. Again, that is cbssports.com/cover3 brackets. The overall winner in our bracket pool will be getting a prize. The prize will be a $100 gift card toward Paramount Plus. But who enters just one pool? You can also create a group to compete against your friends or your coworkers and fill out your bracket. And if you just enter a bracket in general on cbssports.com, you've got a chance to win a Nissan Rogue and a trip to the 2022 Final Four. You can play on the CBS Sports app, which, by the way, our mobile bracket game is the best out there. It is fantastic. It's got all the analysis in there. Like 17 brilliantly written team blurbs that were submitted right before Selection Sunday so they could auto-populate. I don't know who wrote them, but I heard they're brilliantly written by someone who covers college basketball for CBS Sports, and we've got them for the other teams too. Again, that's cbssports.com/cover3 bracket on your app or on CBS Sports. We can compete for a $100 gift card to Paramount Plus against us, but just entering a bracket puts you in the mix for a Nissan Rogue, a car, and a trip to the 2022 Final Four. Bud, we got to get you in there. I need to see your name in there. I need to see as many names as possible. I think we're up around 80 last time I checked.
114.
114? Love to see it. Let's see if we can get to 150.
Let's double it. Forget that. Let's double it. Let's get to 250. Let's go.
And 2,000 Apple Podcast reviews. If you guys are listening to us, you're listening to this whole show, SEC West preview. Let's pull up the Apple Podcast app. Let's get us 2,000 reviews. Like let's just get this done today and not worry about it the rest of the month.
100%.
I want to hit those goals.
Yeah, go ahead.
The only thing on my mind is, like, Chip, you just gave me the reason why I don't want to see the college football playoff expand, because if the college football playoff expands, that means we're going to have to write blurbs about every team that's in the college football playoff like we did for the app for the bracket. And you know who's going to end up having to write those blurbs?
Us.
Yeah. So, no, I'm very much against college football playoff expansion now.
It is much easier to be able to wrap your head around the competitors when it's 4 teams versus 68. 100%, without a doubt. All right, let's go ahead and dive in. Speaking of the college football playoff, Alabama Crimson Tide is where we start. Perfect 10-0 in the SEC 10-game schedule. Tack on the SEC championship game against Florida. Tack on 2 college football playoff wins against Notre Dame and Ohio State. 13-0 as Nick Saban claims another national championship. And good gracious, we got some turnover, baby, because not only do we lose a Mac Jones and Najee Harris and Alex Leatherwood, Heisman Trophy winner Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle, stud player, Patrick Surtain, but also on the sidelines. So all of a sudden we say goodbye to Steve Sarkisian, Kyle Flood, Charles Huff, Jeff Banks. Big time turnover, especially leaning towards the offensive side of the ball. But we've got some big names coming in. Bill O'Brien, new offensive coordinator. Doug Marrone, new offensive line coach. Goodness gracious, we're just getting NFL head coaches coming in here. That's even a step up from the old like Butch Jones, Charlie Strong kind of thing. Just moving up in the world. And so as we start to look at our big questions here, I will, if y'all are curious about Bryce Young, I will entertain those questions. I'll tell you, I'm pretty confident. I'm probably more interested in seeing how the wide receiver position shakes out just because we lost so much there. And it'd be easy to say, hey, John Mechie III is just going to step right up and be awesome. And I'm not sure that he's going to be the guy. And I'm not sure that, that's necessarily something we should put on him or the role that he fits in that offense. We will see. As I was doing my research, I had this burning question. Do we need to see a dominant Alabama defensive front, or does that even matter anymore? Thinking back to the days of Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, just year over year. And then I went back through my notes and I was like, Christian Barmore was awesome we saw like Will Anderson be a stud at linebacker as a freshman. Malachi Moore, obviously not defensive front, but a secondary player who came in kind of in that nickel spot. Christian Harris was another new young star. So as we're tracking the development of Pete Golding and sort of his relationship within Alabama's defense, I'm curious to see how that group shapes out. And as football is changing, is it even realistic for me to expect Alabama to have a 2015 kind of defense? So the wide receivers and the defense are my burning questions for a team that without a doubt will be top 3 going into next season. Where are y'all looking at for spring headlines and news coming out of Tuscaloosa?
The wide receiver, I think obviously is huge, and just the amount of players that they are replacing on the offense is something that's important. But one thing that you did touch on that I'm interested in, that I think the spring is important for, is Bill O'Brien, because Bill O'Brien is taking over this offense. He's going to be the primary play caller, replacing Steve Sarkisian, who did a fantastic job calling plays, who replaced Lane Kiffin, who did a fantastic job calling plays. And I know Bill O'Brien has his coaching history as being the offensive coordinator. He was the offensive coordinator for the Patriots when, before he took the Penn State job. When he took the Penn State job, he was calling the plays at Penn State. But he's been at the Houston Texans. He's been the head coach and the general manager. I'm not sure how involved he could be on a weekly basis in putting together an offensive game plan with the roles that he had with the Texans. So I think that for Bill O'Brien, this is an important spring just to kind of get back into the swing of things, of putting together a game plan and calling plays and trying to figure out what guys are working. Because let's be real, since the last time Bill O'Brien was a primary play caller, the offenses across the country have changed a lot. So I think that he's kind of got, this is just as much a spring practice for him as it will be for the players learning the plays and learning the playbook. And I do agree with you, like with the Bryce Young situation, I mean, they haven't named him the starter yet, have they? But it's like, it's pretty much assumed that Bryce Young is going to be the starter. Is there somebody on this depth chart that I don't know about that has a legitimate shot to wrestle the job away?
I think it'll be Bryce Young. I mean, Paul Bear Bryant, their grandson. I think it's going to be Bryce Young.
I mean, Bryant's not beating out Bryce Young. Bryce Young's a 5-star, and the things that excite me about Bryce Young, honestly, Bud, come from some of your scouting, just talking about his accuracy, talking about the way that he moves, the way he's able to process his reads. Like, he just sounds like he's ready. I mean, sounds like he's got at least the tools to be able to go out and execute if given the opportunity. Yeah.
I mean, he was more polished as a passer coming out of SoCal than DJ was at Clemson. Maybe ceiling is a little bit lower than DJ's, just physical ability. DJ's obviously built like a tight end, but super accurate, hits guys on the run, processes quickly, quick release, mobile in the pocket. He can run a little bit, but he's not somebody Bama's going to be running because he's not that big of a guy. But I mean, just the guy can play the position. He's the least of my worries with Alabama.
What I think is a really interesting dynamic with the Bill O'Brien hire. Typically, if you see this offense struggle, the quarterback probably would get the blame. But with Bryce Young's pedigree, with the expectations of him being this outstanding prospect, I think if the offense sputters or doesn't look great, I think because Bill O'Brien already, is it fair to say he's unlikable? That's the persona of him. In NFL circles, it is for sure. Everyone every year was like, how does Bill O'Brien have a job? Deshaun Watson saving him, can't get past the next level. So he comes in with kind of this reputation that he's trying to overcome. If the offense struggles, I think it'll be interesting that he'll get some of the criticism more so maybe than the quarterback would, which, if you had Sark back, that wouldn't be the case at all, or Lane Kiffin. And the bar has been set now with this new evolution of Nick Saban's squads that there'll be a top 5 offense. And I'm curious, Tom said something about Bill O'Brien not having called plays. He's also been out of college football for a while, period. And there are different schemes that are run, different that are different than what you'll see in the NFL, even, that he'll have to adapt to that. Now, I'm sure he's doing film study and he's got a lot of time to be able to do that. But just the adjustment back to the college game, I think, will be interesting here too, with less time to work with guys. You don't have, you can't have your quarterbacks in meetings for 4 or 5 hours every day in the offseason, which you would do in the NFL. So it's going to be an adjustment period for him. So I think it's a fascinating dynamic of Bill O'Brien probably being the bigger question mark than who's going to replace Mac Jones. And it's crazy how that's kind of the case that we're dealing with.
I don't think he carries the same stigma in college. I mean, certainly very unliked in the NFL, as you mentioned, Danny, but he also doesn't have a massive talent advantage in the NFL like he does at Alabama. I mean, Alabama has the best talent in the country by a pretty good margin. They out-talent every single team on their schedule. Pretty much whatever you call is going to work. I don't really have any concerns about Bill O'Brien because, I'm pretty sure that, Nick Saban would have called up Bill Belichick to cross-reference, hey, like, is this guy good? Do you think he can work in college? He worked at Penn State pretty well. Again, Alabama has insane talent. And to me, this is sort of like the Nick Saban offense now, right? It didn't change all that much going coordinator to coordinator to coordinator to coordinator. They ran a little more hard play action last year. I think it's because they had an insane offensive line and they could block for, forever. I don't really have that many concerns about Bill O'Brien. I also think that he's a guy that does like to use the tight end position. And they have some tight ends who we like a lot in Jaleel Billingsley and Miller Forrestall. So with those guys, I think that maybe more multiple tight end sets for Alabama early on to help out Bryce Young, perhaps running the football. They bring back, pretty good offensive line. A couple guys are departed, but they don't have, it's not like another team that we're going to be talking about where they have to basically replace everybody. I don't have that many concerns about the offense. Can John Mechie be a 1? I think so. Can he be a Devontae Smith 1? Probably not. Right. But like, that's not a realistic expectation. The guy just won the Heisman as a receiver for the first time since, I forget.
It's Tim Brown. But I think you bring up a good point with the tight ends and Bill O'Brien's offense, because I think that there's a good chance that Jaleel Billingsley is this season's Kyle Pitts, just the way that he's with his talent and the way he's likely to be utilized in a Bill O'Brien offense. And another like coin in the pro side for Bill O'Brien as an offensive coordinator and a play caller. There's only one coach I know of in history who made Christian Hackenberg look good, and it was Bill O'Brien.
True. Who do you think comes out of that running back room? Or do you think it's just going to end up being by committee? Because they've got dudes and they got a lot of options. And I think Robinson was probably the number 2 last year to Najee Harris. Is it just sort of like everyone moves up in line, or do you see somebody taking a big step forward? Sanders,
I think Robinson is probably the guy. He's clearly the dude they trust, right? Pass protection, catching the ball, hitting the right hole. There's a wild card I think you could look at in Trey Sanders. Like people in Florida have known about Trey Sanders for a long time, played at IMGs from Port St. Joe up there in the Panhandle. If Trey can finally stay healthy and do his job, he has some ability that I'm not sure that Robinson has, but Robinson's more of the known quantity. So I would expect to see Robinson early.
Speaking of turnover, let's take it on to College Station. Texas A&M, 8-1 last season. 9-1 once they tack on that Orange Bowl win. They finished number 5 in the final college football playoff rankings, number 4 in the final AP poll, which again, as I've said on here, is just like the perfect spot because you can always argue it should have been us and not Notre Dame without actually having to go and play Alabama. It's beautiful for the recruiting trail. Great to fire up your boosters. In the returning production, it ain't great for Texas A&M. And a big part of that, especially on the offensive side of the ball, is that we're losing Kellen Mond. Now, burning questions. The Texas A&M quarterback battle is going to be one of the big ones to follow. Zach Calzada, Haynes King, Eli Stowers, right? That right?
Stowers.
Eli Stowers is going to be your freshman who could come in there and potentially jump ahead of your 2 players who are already in there. Calzada, 6'3", more of a pro style. Haynes King, a little bit more dual threat. The defense last year, as we've seen it under Mike Elko, I feel like they played pretty well. And the question is that group elite? My burning question is the defense elite in 2021? And does it lead the way, if it is elite, for an offense that we can talk about Jimbo Fisher and, whether he's going to open things up, adjust, evolve, or whether we're going to continue to see the same plodding, old school Jimbo approach. And if that defense is not elite, then do we see any changes in the Texas A&M offense in the way that the Aggies take care of business after just incredible, after a very, very good finish last year? The worst thing that I could imagine for, not the worst thing, but a bad thing for Jimbo Fisher would be to check back in this year at 8-4, 7-5. Like it need to keep pushing, need to be able to keep on the gas. You don't want to lose any of this momentum that you've got right now. So how are we feeling about the Aggies? You can take it quarterback, defense, whatever's on the top of y'all's mind.
I feel pretty good. They return, I think, what is it, 20 of 22 starters on defense, or pretty close to that. This was already a defense that last year was, top 15-ish in SP plus. I think Mike Elko's really good. They have recruited extremely well along the defensive line. I think that they have an argument for the best defensive line in the SEC. Like, they're right there pretty much with anybody, I think. And that's a really great place to start for a defense that has, quite a lot of experience and a defense which will probably help carry the Aggies early. I really don't have, many questions on that side of the ball. On the other side of the ball, my main question is, I've said this before. I don't think Jimbo's offense is getting less explosive than it used to be. I just think the rest of college football is getting more explosive around it, and A&M's not moving forward with that. 3 straight years, 95th or worse in passing explosiveness. That's just a huge red cell on any spreadsheet that you keep, right? It lights up. And last year, despite that, they were 10th in the country in offensive SP plus because they were so damn good and so damn consistent and really good at the short stuff and really good running the football. And I think Jimbo's a really good, play caller as far as that kind of stuff. And it's very West Coast, control the ball with the short pass. Honestly, more of their explosive plays happen via the run than the pass. The thing is, now that you lose all these guys, like, they didn't have any of their starters miss a game last year on the offensive line. I looked at this. Did you guys see these snap counts? I'm going to read them to you real fast. 669, 669, 669, 668, 646. Every single one of their 5 starters played every snap on the offensive line. And now 4 of those dudes are gone. Like, they have got to find a way to hit explosive plays because Jimbo's offense last year was good enough, in my opinion, to grind out 10, 12 play drives without mistakes because they were very veteran. They knew what they were doing. And their receivers weren't anything special. So it kind of fit.
Osborne opted out, and they didn't really have a lot of answers that were ready to step up.
And what's his name? Like, tore his ACL in the preseason, right? I forgot the kid's name now. But like this year, there's no way that new offensive line is going to make a lot more mistakes. They're going to get some more penalties. That they're going to be in more second and 15 type stuff due to a false start or second and 20 to a hold. They got to find ways to hit more explosive plays. I think that is the real question I have for them, and whatever quarterback they choose needs to fit that.
I agree. You look at the defensive side of the ball. This was a great defense last year. Most of it's back. It's probably still going to be a very good defense at a minimum in 2021. So I don't have any concerns on that side of the ball, but I'm with you, bud. Offensively is going to be the question, and it's not just the personnel. It is going to be the offense that you're running, because you mentioned like the lack of explosive plays in the passing attack. If you look at Texas A&M's last year, their offense, it just passed attempts with an air yards of 20 yards or more. For listeners who don't know what air yards are, they're basically just every yard past the line of scrimmage. So if the line of scrimmage is the 20-yard line and the pass is thrown to the 27 before it's caught, that was 7 air yards. But of pass attempts of 20 air yards or more, Texas A&M only had 33 attempts last year. That ranked 13th in the SEC. The only team that threw fewer was Kentucky. The national average was 49. So that just kind of gives you an example or an idea of what we're talking about when it's the lack of explosiveness in the Texas A&M offense. It's not just the players at receiver making big plays. It's not just, it's not having it baked into the playbook. It's not baked into what the routes that they're running. We're talking about kind of a dink and dunk offense, which is becoming more and more obsolete in the college football world and in the NFL world at the same time. So I do think that will hinder Texas A&M unless they take a step forward in that spot. Now, maybe that was just all Jimbo is comfortable calling with Kellen Mond. Maybe he gets a quarterback in there this year where he feels more comfortable opening things up and being more aggressive down the field. You'd like to see it if you're an Aggies fan, because I think that really does raise the ceiling of what this team is able to accomplish in 2021.
If you go back and look at Jimbo's offenses without Jameis Winston, who you could argue was a little reckless with the football, especially after they won the national championship, he was taking a lot of the risks down the field and having success with those. And I'm sure it's something that Jimbo is kind of looking for and saying, hey, I need that quarterback to press the ball down the field. The problem is the schemes that he's dialing up are not like, there's a lot, like you see 75% completion percentage rates out there. You're not going to see that in Jimbo's offense. I think it's antiquated, and I think Jimbo is stubborn. I mean, Bud, you know him better than probably anybody, covered him more. Don't you think that's probably a fairly accurate way to? And a lot of college football coaches are stubborn. I don't think he's the type to self-scout and say, yeah, let me copy some other schemes, because that's what you have to do. Is you have to look around and steal schemes from other people and implement those in your system. I don't picture Jimbo doing that. So I don't envision all of a sudden a new look Texas A&M offensive attack, especially with Isaiah Spiller coming back. Like, they're going to lean on the running backs even more. So I think it'll be more traditional, the way college football was played 10 years ago as the way it's played in 2021.
Can we get real schemy here for a second? Like Danny, I want to bounce this off you. I've watched Jimbo's offense a lot. I've seen pretty much all the coaching clinics he's ever done. They're out there on the internet if you want to find them. And I've been to some. His offense wants to have an answer for any defense on every play, right? And it's up to the QB to read that out, and it's up to the receiver to read the coverage and break off the route at the right time. And as a result, like, if it's perfect, it's really freaking hard to stop. It's not a very college-y offense, right? Like, there are some offenses that are very boom or bust. Jimbo's is much more, consistent. But as a result, you don't get as many yards after the catch because they're not really designing plays that are trying to free up one guy. Like, if you watch Oklahoma or even watch Alabama last year, they would call 2 or 3 shot plays a half at least. And if it wasn't there, okay, check down. But it's really a play designed for one dude. Jimbo's offense, not saying they never do that. That's not true. They do not do that nearly as often as some of these more quote unquote college offenses do, right? And I think that nowadays, Danny, to your point, teams are completing just as a high percentage of passes as A&M does, but they're doing it far, much further down the field, which means that the rest of the sport is getting more explosive around you while you're still kind of running the same thing. And it may be beneath you schematically as a schematic genius to adopt some of these college, kind of lowbrow type concepts that maybe seem like cheating sometimes. But if everybody else is doing it, you're sort of kneecapping yourself if you're not willing to try that some.
Look at the success that Sark had with Devontae Smith. You don't think everybody in the country knew the ball was going to go to Devontae Smith, and yet Sark schemed up plays designed to get to him? I mean, some of the stuff was really basic, easy concepts. The play that they had in the championship game against Ohio State, remember when he ran the little reverse motion? It was just a sprint option to the right, which is a very basic concept that everybody runs. And yet Sark took him out of the backfield, reversed in motion, came back across, and then he went back out. And who was the corner that was covering him that they picked on that was supposed to be? Shaun Wade, who called out, said, yeah, I want Devontae Smith. He was like about to cry. He had tears in his eyes because he's like, I can't keep up with this guy. But like, that's a very simple concept that everybody runs. And Sark just dressed it up a little bit, added a little wrinkle to it. And it's about getting your best players the ball. The game now is about finding those mismatches, finding the weaknesses in the defense and exploiting them. And some of them are very basic concepts like that one. You just dress it up a little bit. You find a way to get to them. Because remember when Jameis was at Florida State, and a lot of people, like, football IQ was something that Jameis had in a large part because of all the stuff that he had on his shoulders at the line of scrimmage that Jimbo was asking him to do. So it was a compliment to Jameis, but it is not easy to play quarterback in Jimbo's system. Like, it is a very complex system, which is a big part of why he's so involved on the field. When you see him getting into it with Jameis, and when you saw him getting into it with Kellen Mond coming off the field, there is a lot of dialogue that takes place, almost to the point where I think it's too much.
I'll also say that, like, he did do a decent job last year, I think, of finding creative ways to get Aeneas Smith the ball, right? Yeah. Like, that was their one playmaker, and he did a good job of that in the Alabama game. I just think it needs to be more call plays for players, not call plays for plays. Like, sometimes the best play isn't find who's open. It's scheme a way to get our best playmaker WTFO. And if it's not there, eat it and run. Like, it's not schematically beautiful. it's not perfect. It's not an answer for every defense, except that some of these plays are going to be dead if you get a certain defensive call, but they're going to be wide the hell open if you get another defensive call.
You just took us right to a coaching clinic with call players for plays, don't call plays. Wait, call plays for players, don't call plays for plays, and WTFO. I mean, I was in a hotel ballroom at a Sheraton, right off the highway at I-85 somewhere in Concord, listening to somebody give that speech right there. Respect.
FTS, feed the studs.
Let's go. We mentioned we've got a lot of coaching turnover in the SEC East, just one new head coach in the SEC West. It is Bryan Harsin taking over for Gus Malzahn at Auburn. The Tigers went 6-4 against the SEC schedule, 6-5. And the impact of Bryan Harsin's arrival comes with both, on-field and off-field questions at the time of the hire, with just a little bit of, looking at Harsin and trying to think about, in a league where we've had so much retread, so much, assistants getting hired, promoted to head coach, comes with a little bit of an outsider vibe. I don't think that is my burning question for spring practice, though. I think that I'm just looking for clues in terms of what Harsin wants Auburn to be. Now, I guess Bo Nix gets the tap at quarterback, but I think that I'd probably be more concerned. Like, I'm cool if he wants to make that an open competition and we really start to entertain who else is going to be there. Certainly Bo Nix has not put together a stellar resume that suggests that he is without a doubt the best player there. And I'm interested to see, because 24/7 Sports has great Auburn coverage. I'm interested to see the confidence in what things are going to look like defensively, because under Kevin Steele, defense was kind of the calling card of this team over the last couple of years. You got a lot of turnover, including, like the transfer of Big Cat Bryant. And so, I think most of my questions for Bryan Harsin's Auburn are not totally scheme, but a little bit but a lot of identity. What are we going to expect the Tigers to look like? Because with the Gus bus, the putt offense and, leading with your defensive line, like it was frustrating at times if you were an Auburn fan, but there was definitely an identity. And I've got, very little to be able to hang my hat on, just because Bryan Harsin at Boise State and Bryan Harsin, even as a coordinator and a head coach in between there, kind of multiple, kind of seems like he's willing to bend to the personnel. So where are our concerns, questions when it comes to Auburn looking ahead to 2021?
I'd like to see a quarterback competition this spring. I don't want to see, if I'm an Auburn fan, I don't want to see Bo Nix just being the unquestioned starter heading into 2021. I want there to be somebody at the spring, at a minimum, pushing him, if not taking the job from him. But at the same time, there's also a part of me that's, just from my angle, Auburn fan or not, maybe not playing under Gus Malzahn would be good for Bo Nix. Maybe being in a different offense with my offensive coordinator Mike Bobo and Bryan Harsin could be good for Bo Nix's development, because as I've talked about on this show millions of times, I feel like I don't really remember any quarterbacks that Gus Malzahn developed as much as they just were finished products as soon as he got them, and they stayed the same the entire time that they were there. So it could go both ways. I think that's one thing I'm going to be keeping an eye on this spring for Auburn, is just, I want to see if Bo Nix is improving in this offense, or to see if there's somebody that's giving him the shot. And I'm not sure who on the roster that would be. I know that they have the 4-star kid in their 2021 class from Houston, whose name I cannot remember right now. Maybe
Demetrius Davis.
There we go. And I don't know if he's polished enough coming out of high school to be somebody we think could really push for the starting job or not, or if there's somebody else, maybe a veteran presence on the roster that, like an upperclassman who could push for it. I don't know, but I would like to see some competition there if I'm an Auburn fan.
I don't think you're going to see it. I think this is going to be Bo Nix all day. I don't think Demetrius Davis, is somebody who can come in and learn this offense year one. But my biggest concern isn't Bo Nix. As Tom mentioned, who's your favorite quarterback that Gus Malzahn's ever developed?
Nick Marshall, the former safety.
Yeah. Like, that's just not an offense that you don't see a lot of quarterback development chucking it around. And every time they tried to go to a quarterback that was more of a passer, it didn't look very good, right? Remember Sean White? Like, that offense that Gus runs is better when you have a guy who's a really good runner. It just is. But my real concern here is not Bo Nix. I don't think Bo Nix is that bad. My concern is, what are they going to do at receiver? Because Seth Williams is gone. Anthony Schwartz is gone. Like, their top pass catchers are gone. I think they only return, like, eyeballing this, maybe 20% of their catches and yards at receiver. And we know from Bill Connolly's numbers, I mean, pass catchers are like continuity year to year there matters a whole heck of a lot. That's a ton to replace. I'm not totally convinced they have the dudes to not have a major drop off there. And maybe it's, maybe it's Canyon, maybe Kobe Hudson, Evans was a good recruit. Maybe Malcolm Johnson, maybe Zevion Capers steps up. They got some guys that were good recruits, but that's a whole lot to lose in 1 year. And I have some concerns about their passing game for that.
Agreed on everything you guys have said. I'm a little bit more worried about Bo Nix. Just, you developed some bad habits, and maybe it's because of that lack of development there. When I watch him play, I'm like, does he realize he's not Lamar Jackson? And yet he is pretty athletic. Like, you want to use that mobility to your advantage. And yet I felt like he relied on it too much. But some of that was probably system-based. Like, he wasn't getting deep into reads. Maybe it was because you didn't ask him to get deep into reads. So that'll be on Bryan Harsin, where I do trust the track record with Harsin. Mike Bobo taking over the offense will be interesting. At least he's familiar with the SEC. Like, I think that was the wise thing that Harsin did, was bring in coordinators who are familiar with the landscape, familiar with the schemes, familiar with the personnel, to kind of rely on in that position. Offensive line should be strong. And receiver, I think it's a position like you can coach up a little bit, but you need somebody to emerge from that very inexperienced group to kind of take over the reins as a kind of lead dog. And I don't know if that's emerged yet, but maybe there's somebody there that we just don't know who it is yet. And then like defensive personnel, I think, there's going to be some issues there, but I kind of trust that they'll have a pretty good, I don't know if it's going to be dominant or a top, 2 or 3 defense in the SEC, but I think it'll be competitive enough to where it should be a pretty solid season for Auburn. I think it's interesting because we've gotten down to this point and we didn't really address it with Alabama. Like, I still think Alabama is probably going to win the West. And then who's the next best team? I think that conversation, it's kind of like Clemson in the ACC. Who's the next best team? I think that's in the West. You have the most intriguing race is who's going to be the second best team. And I think Auburn, along with A&M, along with LSU, and I would maybe even throw in Ole Miss into that group as a wild card, are in that conversation. So I think, all these teams have a lot of questions to answer, but there's going to be one of these teams is going to emerge, and it might be Auburn.
It would be very interesting if I'm proven wrong, but I've got Texas A&M a decided tier above Auburn right now. And with the defense, my reference point is 2019 Georgia vibes. Like, in the back half, like October and November, the 2019 Georgia team just ran off a bunch of 20-17 wins. They're just like, no, we've got one of the best defenses in the country. We'll only give up about 10, 14 points per game, and we'll do just enough offensively to be able to go out there and get a win. And that's kind of not a bad ceiling. Obviously, they made it to the SEC championship game before losing to Joe Burrow and LSU. Speaking of, coming up on the other side, to go from winning the national championship to just getting dogged by Mississippi State in the opener, boy, that'll get you dizzier than a couple of hand grenades. We'll get into the LSU Tigers next. Cover 3 listeners, I want to tell you what our friends at Sportsline are up to during bracket week. You can get every pick, every play, every upset, and fill out your bracket with the help of some of the best sports data analysts in the game. Visit Sportsline now to see which teams will make and break your bracket and see who cuts down the nets, all from a model that beat nearly 90% of brackets last tournament 1 year after finishing in the top 5%. Again, that is Sportsline, sportsline.com, or download the Sportsline app. Also, you get all the good bracket advice. Where do you get it? On CBS Sports HQ. I'll be jumping off this recording and jumping on CBS Sports HQ to tell you, who are going to be the teams to watch, the upsets to watch, all the superlatives. We're giving it to you every hour, 24 hours a day. And then, of course, plenty of game coverage once we get going. That is CBS Sports HQ, cbssportshq.com, or in the CBS Sports app. LSU went 5-5 last.
Hold on 1 second. I just want to get one thing on record here. I just want to say that if I ever have an encounter with a hand grenade and the only thing I'm left with is dizziness, I feel like I won that encounter.
True. I mean, it's as long as everything that you ingest stays inside your stomach, after a couple of hand grenades, then I think that you've won the battle of mortality against that thing. All right. Interesting because, as we're continuing to work through spring gleaning, we started with the ACC because Clemson was off and running early, but LSU is starting to get going. And offensively, you got to talk about the quarterback position because Miles Brennan was given an opportunity and then he got hurt. And, I initially in the offseason started to get the sense because Coach O was going on the record saying, no, we're really happy with his progression. He should be healthy and ready to go. Well, sure enough, Coach Orgeron said in the last couple of days that Max Johnson, who finished the game leading LSU to a couple of wins and was part of, helping a passing offense that really highlighted Keyshawn Butte, fantastic freshman wide receiver talent, and lit it up right near the end of the season. Max Johnson is taking the first reps right now, but he says that all reps are equal. # all reps matter. The offensive line absolutely has to get better. It was not good. And I don't know specifically if that is a scheme thing or if that's going to be a personnel or we're going to still be concerned about it. And, speaking of scheme and speaking of, how something is going to get better, boy, the Bo Pelini defensive experiment did not work. So what are we going to get from the Tigers defensively as they have reshuffled that staff? We talked about the sort of pecking order in my mind. I want to say because of some of the skill position talent that I would put slot LSU ahead of Auburn, especially with Auburn big question marks at wide receiver. But outside of that, I don't know if I'm feeling overly confident that they are, anywhere closer to that Texas A&M and Alabama first tier. So whether it's quarterback, defense, what are the big concerns if you're digging into what's happening in Baton Rouge right now?
I wouldn't be shocked if LSU has a bounce back season. I think that there are concerns. It's one of those things where I look at it and it's like, I'm really not sure what we're going to see from LSU. But if you just kind of put last season in the past and you just kind of ignore everything else surrounding that program right now, and you just look at the basics, there's a lot of returning production on the offense. There's a lot of returning production on the defense. As far as the division is concerned with Connolly's rankings, the only team that has a more, overall returning production is Ole Miss, who we'll get to here shortly. So there's a lot of experience. Last year was a young team, took a lot of lumps, but it still did lose some key players. But it's also a team that had the 3rd ranked recruiting class in the country last year. So you think that if we've upgraded our defensive coordinator position, and I think that going from Dave Aranda to Bo Pelini clearly was a downgrade. I don't know if you're going to upgrade right back to Dave Aranda levels, but if you've upgraded the defensive play calling in that kind of situation, that improves the floor. The new offensive coordinator with more experience on that side of the ball, if you've upgraded there a little bit, that improves the floor. You've obviously got the talent. And I think that as we've got to the end of the season last year, LSU you were seeing signs of improvement going forward. You were seeing some signs of optimism. Like there was that win over Florida, and although it took a crazy shoe toss to help them get it, they still did play well in that game aside from that. So I'm with you, Chip. I think that right now, I think Texas A&M is the most likely team to finish second in that Division II Alabama, or the most likely team to win the division if Alabama somehow stumbles. But I would have LSU as the team right behind Texas A&M, and I don't think the gap is that significant just because of the amount of talent that they have on this roster. Even if we don't know who is emerging yet, you just know there's 5 and 4 stars up and down the depth chart.
Does it feel like, so you said wouldn't be surprised if LSU finishes second in the West.
Yeah.
I wouldn't either. But would it also not surprise you terribly if they had another barely above 500 seat? Like,
no, if the floor falls out, I won't be surprised at all.
Right. So for those reasons, like, so I'll give you some of the reasons why I'm a little bit concerned about LSU. Last year, 3-5, they had been blown out by Auburn. They were a 28-point underdog versus Bama. Game gets canceled. Squeak out a win against Arkansas. And then they lose 2 games in a row, and they're sitting there at 3-5. They actually do get blown out by Alabama when they make up the game December 5th. And then they salvaged the season, which was awesome. And for me, it was huge because it felt like things were coming off the rails and you might have another Gene Chizik situation. And I was worried about the team quitting on them. Instead, they get the shoe toss game in Gainesville, win that game by 3. They come back, win the barn burner shootout with Ole Miss. So they salvaged the season. They avoided complete disaster because I do feel like they were on the brink of absolute disaster for the last couple of weeks of the season, but they salvaged it. And I think Ed Orgeron realizes that, which is why you saw a lot of staff changes, why, you see, and I know, you retired it, offensive coordinator, so you bring in, I just feel like they're trying to capture the magic of Joe Brady once again, even going to his quarterback coach for the Carolina Panthers to be your answer. My concern with Jake Peetz is that I'm looking at his resume. I don't see a lot of play calling experience on there, which is kind of important. Like, you can know the system, but do you know why you're running the plays? Do you know why you're adjusting things in a game, in a live game? Do you make good adjustments? We don't know those things yet. Maybe he's the next coming of Joe Brady, maybe, but I just feel like they're also, as bad as the program felt, I feel like Ed Orgeron knows it. Like, and he said, hey, I'm from Louisiana. I know the expectations. I invite them. I wonder too, there were some former players that were out there very vocal, questioning the culture. I'm a little bit worried about LSU. Same, but to your point, Tom, talent is always there. If you pull it together, you can make a run and it could be incredible. And they could, maybe the sky's the limit. I love what I saw to Max Johnson. I think he will end up winning the job. I think he's got the locker room. You got those 2 wins under your belt late in the season. So I think they've got their quarterback. I think it's smart to play it up and say it's an open competition. But there's a lot of this could be, again, it could be a home run or it could be a complete dumpster fire. I just don't know.
Did Ed Orgeron build a team or did he build a program? We're going to find out a lot this year because last year was a COVID thing and they lost just an absolute ton. I think it was very hard to judge, what they were doing. And I think it's the confidence that they gained from those wins down the stretch is real confidence and real things to build on. But if you look at their post-game win expectancy, they beat Arkansas, 11% post-game win expectancy, which says extremely lucky. Florida, 1% win expectancy, literally the luckiest win any team had in the entire country last year out of every college football game played. Ole Miss, 27%. So their November and December was pretty much, no well-played games, 3 wins. I think there's a reason they went out and made those coaching changes, but there's a lot I like about this team. I think Max Johnson can be a good quarterback for them. Also, I would start him because his brother is a total stud at tight end. So if you want a tiebreaker there, as far as recruiting goes, I would, try to keep him and the Johnson family happy there. Their entire offensive line is back. I think they'll run the football better this year with that offensive line. I think getting Austin DeCoulis back is a pretty big deal. I love Elias Ricks and Stingley at corner. I mean, assuming Rick sticks around, that's an awesome pair of corners. Ali Gay is back. They have a lot of difference makers on defense that, I really think with better coaching can help them. And, if internally they're not a mess, I think this team absolutely has second in the West finish potential, right? But I agree with you guys that, maybe there's also the certainty is much less with these guys, but I think their ceiling is higher than A&M, but their floor might be lower.
Ole Miss went 4-5 last season, tacked on a bowl win to finish 5-5. Did Lane Kiffin live up to the expectations? I'd say so. It was really entertaining. It's fun to watch Rebels football, and those are my expectations. Matt Corral back, Jerry and Ely back, 4 out of 5 offensive linemen back. Listen, losing Elijah Moore hurts because he was awesome, but I will say that I'm just kind of expecting that this high volume offense is just going to allow for opportunities, and they're going to figure out ways to get players open and figure out ways to distribute the ball, including after Kenny Yeboah opted out. I forgot about this. Swag Kelly's little bro coming in at tight end, Casey Kelly. So let's see if Swag Kelly's little bro ends up stepping up. The defensive line couldn't stop the run. The defensive line couldn't rush the passer. Sam Williams is probably your name to know at the linebacker buck position. But in terms of questions and concerns, I'm really not even I will be surprised if Ole Miss's defensive line takes a great step forward this year. It's not part of my expectations for the Rebels, but that could be disrespecting the Rebel Alliance and all the other Rebels around.
I'm bullish on Ole Miss. I think they're going to be a thorn in the side again. I think their win-loss record improves. I think their quarterback is a dark horse Heisman candidate. I think they cannot get worse on the defensive side of the ball. They're going to get better. I think they pull off some big wins this year. Like I think, like you talk about teams that could play for second in the SEC West. I think it could be Ole Miss.
See, I agree with you in that I feel like Ole Miss can pull off some big wins. I think that if I look at the SEC West and it's like, all right, pick which one of these teams is most likely to beat Alabama, I'm picking Ole Miss just because the offense that they run is the same kind of offense that has always given Alabama problems. So I would put them in that contention. It's just, I also think Ole Miss is fully capable of some big losses as well because of the problems that we've mentioned on defense. And we saw, because like when we were talking about LSU, I talked about how Ole Miss has the most returning production of any team in the division. A lot of that's on defense, but it's kind of a catch-22. It's like, well, okay, we've got nearly the entire defense back. The defense sucked, so I don't know if it's good to have all those guys back, or you'd hope that some of those guys lose their jobs to players who are outperforming them this spring, or you just hope that those guys overperformed. But I'm with you, Chip. My expectations for Ole Miss under Lane Kiffin will always only be just entertain me. And I am fully 100% confident that the Rebels are going to be fun to watch. They might be 6-6. They might be 10-2. They might be 4-8. I don't know, but they're going to be fun.
So my numbers tell me that when Elijah Moore was out of the lineup last year, Matt Corral really struggled, and double that with Kenny Yeboah. But my eyes tell me that Lane Kiffin is so brilliant at scheming guys wide open that, like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to walk myself into saying that Elijah Moore doesn't matter, because he does. Like, he's really good. He was also super reliable catching the football. He had a 1% drop rate. Jonathan Mingo, who they, might be counting on to be their number one this year, or at least their two, had an 11% drop rate. So, like, Elijah Moore, super electric with the ball in his hands, but also, like, the ball got into his hands because he caught the ball really well. Yeah. And so I do think they're going to miss Elijah Moore. I mean, maybe Drummond or, Sanders or Jackson can step up there. Maybe Mingo can become more sure-handed, but I'm a little bit worried about what they lose, offensive explosiveness at the skill positions. But my greater concern is defense. You can bring back all the experience in the world, but if you don't have height, weight, speed, I don't really care. Now, you might have fewer blown coverages, right? Ole Miss last year, that was kind of a major issue at times. Some of their run fits were real sketchy. They were 117th in explosive play rate allowed, which is just, that's not great. Their passing completion rate was 124th allowed. They allowed 68% completions, which is just, it's hard to do that on air sometimes. But like, I think Chip nailed it. Got to figure out what the pass rush is in spring. Like, can you find a pass rusher? Because last year they didn't really have anybody who rushed the passer all that effectively. And then how much can Lane Kiffin's scheming overcome the loss of Moore and Kenny Bowe? I think the offensive line will be okay. And I'm interested to see what comes out of this spring, because they were 80th on defense last year. They can probably improve that. Like, they don't have to be good to improve that. Can you get to below average? Can you get from bad to below average? That'd be cool. That'd help.
That's like the Oklahoma move from 115 to 50.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you can
that's doable.
If you can make that kind of jump, then it can really help your team's success. Arkansas 3-7 last year in year one with Sam Pittman. This was one of the spots where, in particular, I'm thinking, man, this is a team that with a full spring practice, with a full off season, this could really matter, because offensive coordinator Kendall Briles, somebody who we consider to be on the I guess still cutting edge, but at least an offensive coordinator worth respecting beyond just his last name. He has a little bit more time to be able to get out there and try and install what he wants the Hogs to be. Now, at quarterback, With Felipe Franks gone, it's going to be either KJ Jefferson or Malik Hornsby. And he does have 5 starting offensive line back if everybody can stay healthy. That was a little bit of a problem for the Razorbacks, and a good wide receiver in Treylon Burks. Similar to Ole Miss, my big concern and my big question defensively is going to be about the pass rush, because they did not have a pass rush last year. It was a lot of wasn't Arkansas, Bud, the one you talked about where it's like, we're just going to drop 8, just rush 3,
100%.
drop 8 every single time. So I don't know if that's the game plan again, or if that was the, like, we didn't have any time to install game plan. But the Razorbacks have some intriguing spots where I think that they should be benefited by having full spring, full summer, and probably look a little bit more like what Sam Pittman imagined when he was hired.
Yeah, no, I would like to see a change in the defensive approach, like you mentioned, but the drop 8, they played a ton of umbrella stuff last year, and it was okay in that, like, they didn't have terrible defensive numbers against the pass, but they were kind of just averages. They weren't very good. And just like the pass rush, they ranked, 121st nationally in pressure rate, and they weren't much better in sack rate at 117th. It's hard to consistently win on the defensive side of the ball without getting pressure on the quarterback. And if we look at another stat that's just pass rush pressure, in that there's a stat that we have access to from what's the company called? From True Media. Yeah. That tells you, like, the percentage of snaps that the defensive line won against the offensive line. The national average was 52.9%. Arkansas was dead last in the SEC at 47.5%. So even with everybody else dropping back into coverage, the defensive line just wasn't winning enough battles to create pressure on the quarterback. And I think that is a step that we need to see Arkansas take this year.
Can we fight?
We're going to see improvement. Yeah,
like
go for
it. I know we don't, like the lock fight thing, but Tom, I just disagree. I think they need to keep doing what they're doing. Like, I don't think they have the players to do other stuff. And I think that Arkansas should be commended for the incredible humility and honesty that it had with himself, that our guys can't run, right? We don't have anybody who can rush the passer up front. We're just going to be the most humblest, just like conservative defense out there. And they were. I mean, look at these numbers. This is absolutely crazy to me. So they were 113th in completion percentage allowed, 67. They were 6th in passing explosiveness allowed, right? It was like they were playing A&M's offense every game. And dude, I mean, like they knew who they were. They were like the ultimate no big plays, no big plays, no big plays. Let's play red zone roulette game. And that is a really good strategy. It's almost like, Chip, you play golf, right? You got the old guy on the course. He's 210 off the tee. If you play well, you're going to beat him, but he never hits the ball out of bounds. If you play poorly, he's going to beat you. Arkansas doesn't have the guys to beat the better teams in the SEC. I think the style they play absolutely allows them to make a bowl game, which should be the goal at Arkansas. They're never going to contend for the West. I think what they do is really smart based on the quality of player that they have. Personally, is it boring? Is it hopeless? Yeah, but like it's effective for their goals.
You're literally arguing for something that you just said is boring and hopeless. Like,
but it's effective to reach their goals. Like, it's no fun to hit a 210 off the tee. And, but like 5s beat 6s, right?
I get that, but shouldn't you strive to have a pass rush, strive to get the players that will allow you to change that scheme? That's what I'm saying. I'd like to see, because like they limited passing explosiveness, but 35% of the pass attempts they allowed resulted in a first down. So,
but not a 40-yard first down.
No, but still, you get a first down. That's below average nationally. So it wasn't very good. It's just like you're kind of just extending the likely points that you're going to surrender. Like, if you're just giving the other team 5-6 yards a pop, well, teams are going to take 5-6 yards a pop. And then again, they're playing the red zone roulette. We can get a stop.
Not all teams. Remember Ole Miss last year? Matt Corral would not take the 5-6 yards a pop. He wanted 14-15 yards a pop, and he got picked 6 times. This is their formula to win.
I think
college kids ain't that
strive for more. I think that if they need to find a better pass rush, and that way that'll change things up. Because I I understand what you're saying in that if you're Arkansas, getting to 6-6, 7-5 going to bowls should be the goal. But for every fan base, like if I'm Sam Pittman and I start like right now, Arkansas fans are going to be happy that I'm going 6-6, 7-5 going to bowls. They're like, woo, we're going in the right direction. If I keep posting 6-6, 7-5 seasons, I'm not going to be there very long.
Yeah.
Mississippi State went 3-7 last year, tacked on a fight with their bowl win to go 4-7. I don't know honestly right now if we have any suspensions hanging over to the beginning of the season or what happened, but that was a mess, a disgusting game anyway. Pouring rain, just gross. Nothing. I know.
Offended by what happened.
No wonder they wanted to fight. That did not look like a fun football game to be a part of. So they had that offensive explosion against LSU, but then once the season got going, we're like, Mississippi State's got a pretty decent defense, and the offense wasn't all that great. Now we got a little bit of a glimpse offensively of what's ahead in 2021 as Will Rogers kind of got just thrown into the fire, got a little bit of experience as a freshman. And so I think we expect him to be leading Mike Leach's offense again. What are the burning questions for the Bulldogs going into spring practice?
Can we move the ball? Why did you bring Mike Leach in?
For the offense, right?
And what was the weak part of your team?
I do think that the Mike Leach pitch in terms of the hire has to also be like, well, he's one in Lubbock and Pullman, and we're in Starkville. You're doing a little bit of the big picture. He figures out ways to do more with less kind of thing.
And I do expect that we're going to see improvement from Mississippi State because we've seen with Mike Leach at previous stops, year one, especially when he's coming into a situation where he kind of has to overhaul everything. There's an adjustment period. Like when he took over at Texas Tech, it wasn't that different from what the Red Raiders were already doing. So they went 7-6. But when he took over at Washington State, they had run the air raid in previous years, but it wasn't exactly the same way that Mike runs his. Didn't exactly have the personnel built for it. They went 3-9 year one. Then they went 6-7 year two. They went 3-9 in year three, and then they went 9-4. And that's when things kind of took off in Washington State. Kind of became self-sustaining in Mike Leach's model. So I won't be shocked at all if we see improvement, because I have a hard time thinking that offense is going to be as bad as it was last year. I think that you get a quarterback in that's more of a fit for what you want. You have an actual offseason to install it. You're not dealing with suspensions and all that kind of stuff, and guys are able to learn the offense this offseason. I think that's going to raise the floor, and we're going to see improvement. So I do expect Mississippi State to be better. It's just I don't know how much better they can be in this division. And I know, Bud, you've talked about it on previous shows this offseason. It's I think Mississippi State fans, they're going to have a good, solid football team. It's going to come down to, things were great under Dan Mullen. I don't know if they're ever going to be that great again.
I agree. I mean, like Dan Mullen is that kind of 95th percentile result in the entire history of your program under the current construct of the SEC West, right? So I have some questions here. What is Mississippi State going to do pass rush wise? Because Spencer and Jones last year for them, they were really, really pretty good. I mean, Kobe Jones had 19 pressures. Marquise Spencer had 16, and they were also extremely good against the run. And now both those guys are gone. So, that's concerning. But like we noted with Arkansas, they also had a lot of offensive line problems last year. And I think I do see potential for quite a bit of improvement with Mississippi State this year offensively. I think the second year in Mike Leach's air raid, like you guys noted, really makes a lot of sense. There were games last year where the better defensive lines they played dropped 8, but still got pressure with 3. I mean, go back and watch. I think it's I'm trying to think about the point where I started live betting the hell out of this. But this is log into your other accounts and empty it as far as Mississippi State team total unders live game, because A&M started out, they were playing them kind of head up for a little bit. And I was like, really? And then they just started dropping everybody. And then A&M still is like crushing these guys up front. Like they're winning 3-on-5. I'm like, oh, Mississippi State's in real trouble here because their quarterbacks aren't that good. And so I think they have a real shot to be better on the offensive line with a little better continuity, a little bit better understanding. Playing with those splits, by the way, is something that is not normal for an offensive lineman to play with that wide of splits, even at the high school spread level. So that's something they can get adjusted to. I like Coach Zach Arnett. The main questions I have are how much better can the offensive line be, and then what's the pass rush going to be? Because I think they found something at quarterback last year.
Yep, Will Rogers should be very interesting to track. You can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fornelli. You can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow him off on the internet somewhere at Danny Cannell. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.